What if I told you that almost everything you think you know about yourself is a carefully crafted illusion? Not a harmless one, not a small quirk of personality, but a deep-rooted fabrication you've been carrying for years without realizing it. You believe you are you because you see a face in the mirror, because you've memorized the features, the mannerisms, the tone of your own voice. But that image, that personality, that way you walk and speak and hold yourself, it isn't truly yours. It's a costume stitched together from the scraps of what you think others want to see. Every choice you make about how to present yourself is a performance. Every polite smile you force when you'd rather turn away. Every harmless joke you laugh at to avoid seeming awkward. Every sentence you filter before speaking, it's all part of a role you never auditioned for but somehow landed the lead in. You live on a stage you didn't build, following a script you didn't write, and the cruelest part is you've been doing it so long you no longer remember where the act ends and you begin. And here's the unsettling question. Fit in where? With whom? Who exactly is this mysterious audience you're working so hard to please? Have you ever stopped to truly think about it? You walk into a room and feel the weight of unseen eyes. You make decisions as though every move is being scored and recorded. You measure your words in case they echo back to you in judgment. But here's what you've never considered. What if no one is actually watching? What if that burning spotlight you imagine on your back doesn't even exist? The truth is more unnerving than the illusion. That audience in your head, the one you've been performing for your entire life, isn't real. It never was. You've lived under the conviction that every step is observed, every choice evaluated, every flaw remembered. But the eyes you feel aren't strangers' eyes at all, they're yours. They're the fragments of your own mind playing hide and seek behind fear. That twisting in your stomach, that pressure on your chest, that voice whispering, "Be careful, don't make a fool of yourself. They'll laugh at you." It's not the voice of the crowd. It's the echo of everything you've absorbed from a world obsessed with image, approval, and visibility. It's the residue of a culture that taught you, from the moment you could understand words, that your value is measured in how pleasing you appear to others. You've been conditioned to mold yourself, to smooth away anything that might offend, to polish yourself until you shine in a way that fits someone else's taste. And in doing so, you've buried parts of yourself so deeply you've forgotten they were ever yours. Sometimes, you don't even feel like you fit within your own skin anymore. You've been bent and reshaped so many times to meet expectations that you've become a distorted version of yourself, a shape that only exists because you were told that's the one worth showing. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre had a name for this invisible weight, called it the look of the other. But don't mistake it for something innocent. That look is a silent poison, one that seeps into you through the smallest gestures. It's the hesitation to raise your hand when you know the answer. It's the hot flush of shame when you make a mistake in front of others. It's the tremor in your voice when you feel the atmosphere shift and imagine all eyes on you. You might believe this fear comes from the outside, from real people judging you in real time, but more often than not, the fear comes from within. It's your own mind projecting invisible eyes onto the world around you, turning every space into a stage, every moment into a performance review you never agreed to. And here's the paradox that changes everything. The people around you are not tracking your every move. They're not counting your mistakes or storing your faults like ammunition. The truth is, they barely have the time or attention to keep track of their own lives, let alone yours. The thing you've been most afraid of, being the center of someone else's judgment, is an illusion you've been feeding all along. You think others are scrutinizing you, but they're too busy fighting the same invisible battle you are. They're stuck in their own mental theaters, trying to remember their lines, terrified of their own imaginary audience. You're not the star of their show, you're just a passing figure in the background, just as they are in yours. And if that's the case, why keep pretending? Why keep trimming and altering who you are as if every choice is a matter of life or death? Since childhood, you were trained to believe that acceptance equals survival, that rejection wounds deeper than flesh, and that ridicule is fatal. You learned to smile when you wanted to scream, to stay silent when you wanted to fight, to make yourself small so you wouldn't upset the room. But every time you do this, you carve away another piece of your true self. And one day, you look in the mirror and realize you've become nothing but the lowly and expertly rehearsed performance of a life that doesn't belong to you. It's not just about self-esteem, not just about feeling a bit insecure or lacking confidence. This runs far to parrots about existence itself. Because when you've spent years sculpting yourself into what you think others want, you're not simply adjusting your personality, you're replacing it. You're living inside a version of yourself that was designed by the imagined gazes around you, as if you were a product to be marketed, a profile to be approved. And the most brutal truth in all of this is that the people you're bending yourself for aren't paying nearly as much attention as you think. No one is sitting there replaying your mistakes in slow motion. No one is cataloging your flaws like they're precious artifacts. The truth is, most people won't remember the things you punish yourself over for years. And when that realization finally hits you, when you see clearly that so much of your life has been shaped by an audience that doesn't exist, there's a strange kind of vertigo that sets in. It's the dizziness of freedom. Because if no one is actually defining you, then the only person truly responsible for your existence is you. But responsibility is a frightening thing. Without the safety net of an external judge, you're left with no one to blame. You can't hide behind the excuse of, "They won't let me," or "They'll think badly of me," because suddenly the only barrier between you and your real life is the person staring back at you in the mirror. And yet, instead of embracing this liberation, many cling to the old way, to the idea that they can still control how others see them. They try to walk that impossible tightrope, being interesting but not threatening, confident but not arrogant, likable but not fake. It's a constant negotiation, a never-ending performance where the script keeps changing depending on who's in the room. But in trying to be everything for everyone, you slowly become nothing for yourself. You stop being a living person and turn into a carefully polished hologram, projected for collective approval. This hologram might look impressive to others. It might even earn you praise and social acceptance. But inside, there's an emptiness that grows. One day, you wake up and realize you've been curating yourself for so long that you don't actually know who you are without the audience. And that's where the philosopher Sartre's idea of bad faith comes crashing in, not just the lies we tell others, but the lies we tell ourselves to keep from facing the truth. You know something is wrong, but you pretend you don't. You sense that you've lost yourself, but you distract yourself with the applause, telling yourself it's enough. When you live to be seen, when you bend your every move to fit the frame of others' expectations, your life stops belonging to you. Even the most private, personal choices get filtered through the same suffocating question, what will they think of me if I do this? And this question is the slowest, most invisible kind of poison. It doesn't kill in an instant, it erodes you grain by grain, until one day you realize you've become a stranger to yourself. You think you're avoiding pain, but in truth, you're avoiding authenticity. And in doing so, you're cutting yourself off from the only life you'll ever get. Rejection, as painful as it can be, forces you to see yourself clearly. But acceptance, especially shallow acceptance built on performance, only feeds the character you've created. And while the character grows stronger, your real essence dissolves into the background. You start to attract people who don't want the real you, people who are only drawn to the carefully constructed version you've been performing. This is a special kind of hell, surrounding yourself with relationships, opportunities, and communities that are not built for you at all, but for the false version of you you've been keeping alive. And here's the most devastating part: you are the one keeping that false version alive. You are both the prisoner and the jailer. You hold the key to your own freedom, but you've convinced yourself the lock can't be opened, because opening it would mean showing the world something raw, imperfect, and entirely real. True freedom isn't about rejecting everyone's opinions or living in complete isolation. It's about learning to filter judgment, especially your own, when it comes from the sick, inherited self-demand of a world that's been teaching you, your whole life, that your worth depends on your ability to please. The path back to yourself is terrifying because it means tearing down a structure you've spent years building. It means risking the loss of the comfort you've built in the performance. But it also means, for the first time, stepping into a life that belongs entirely to you. There comes a point when you can feel it, when the life you've been living no longer fits. You can't explain it in simple terms, but there's an ache deep inside that no amount of distraction, achievement, or external validation can soothe. You go through the motions, smiling in the right places, laughing when you're supposed to, meeting expectations like a well-trained actor hitting their cues. Yet there's this quiet heaviness pressing on your chest. It's not that everything is falling apart, it's that everything is staying the same, and you know in your bones that it shouldn't. You've been wearing a mask for so long that your skin has grown around it, and removing it now feels dangerous, even impossible. But the cost of keeping it on is starting to outweigh the safety it gives you. And this is where many people stay stuck, because the idea of change is intoxicating from a distance but terrifying when it gets close. You imagine stepping out of the role, speaking your mind without filtering it, moving toward the things that truly matter to you, and for a moment, it feels thrilling. But then fear arrives, whispering its old lines. What if they don't like the real you? What if you lose everything? What if you fail? And just like that, you retreat back into the role, telling yourself it's not so bad, that maybe you can endure it a little longer. But deep down, you know it's not endurance, it's self-abandonment. The process of reclaiming yourself isn't glamorous. It doesn't happen in one defiant outburst or a single dramatic act of rebellion. It happens in small, deliberate steps, often so quiet no one else notices them. It might start with saying no to something you've always said yes to. It might be choosing to stay silent in a conversation where you'd normally fake agreement. It might be pursuing something that excites you even if you know others will find it strange or impractical. These are tiny acts of self-return, and each one chips away at the structure of the false self you've built. At first, the cracks feel uncomfortable, even wrong. You're so used to the walls that living without them feels like being exposed to the cold. But over time, that exposure becomes strength. You begin to realize that the people who truly matter to you aren't drawn to the polished, edited version of you. They're drawn to the parts you've been hiding, the unfiltered edges, the parts that aren't afraid to be messy, vulnerable, or even contradictory. And the more you give yourself permission to show those parts, the more alive you begin to feel. This journey also forces you to confront the reality that not everyone will come with you. Some people will drift away, not because you've wronged them, but because they were never truly connected to the real you in the first place. They were attached to the role you played, and when that role disappears, so does their interest. This loss can be brutal, but it's also cleansing. It makes room for relationships that can withstand truth, for bonds that are built on authenticity instead of performance. And with each step, you start to see that the fear of being judged was never as dangerous as the slow death of living unseen by yourself. The final step is acceptance seno, the kind of acceptance you've been chasing from others, but the acceptance you grant yourself when you stop apologizing for existing as you are. This isn't about perfection or constant confidence. It's about reaching a point where you no longer need to run from your own reflection. You understand that your worth is not something given to you by other people, so it can't be taken away by them either. You realize that you were never meant to be everyone's favorite or to fit seamlessly into every group. Your life was never supposed to be a flawless performance. It was meant to be a living, breathing experience of truth. And truth is rarely perfect. It's sharp in some places, soft in others, unpredictable and alive in ways a performance never can be. When you finally stop performing and start living, there's a strange quiet that falls over your life. The constant mental chatter of, "What do they think?" begins to fade. The invisible audience disappears. You start making decisions based on desire instead of fear, and you find yourself drawn toward things you never noticed before: moments of stillness, bursts of creativity, connections that feel nourishing instead of draining. You no longer move through the world like a product being evaluated, but like a human being who belongs here without condition. And maybe that's the greatest freedom of all, not to be fearless, but to live in such a way that fear no longer decides who you are allowed to be. Because once you've felt that freedom, once you've tasted what it's like to belong to yourself completely, there's no going back to the performance. You know too much now. You've seen what's real. And nothing, not even the lure of approval, will ever be worth giving that up again.